Good morning, sixth graders. Happy Tuesday. We have a lot to do today, so we are going to dive right in. First thing we are going to do is talk about our book talk for today. And like I told you yesterday, it's banned book week. So Charlotte's Web was a banned book and has actually been a lot of times. And that's a book a lot of you have read. If you haven't read it, it's such a good book. It's like a classic and it's awesome. So if you haven't read it, I would be happy to check it out. Just email me and let me know. So some of the reasons it was banned was that a lot of Christian groups thought that it was against God to have talking animals in a book because that God did not create them that way. Therefore, no kids should be allowed to read this book. There's also a head teacher in Great Britain who got rid of all books that had pigs in it because this person thought that might be offensive to Muslim people. So they got rid of all the books with pigs, and the Muslim community thought, well, thanks for considering us, but we're good with it. So they didn't mind, but this head teacher thought that they would. So she tried to get rid of all the books with pigs in it. Another one that it doesn't really define this, but they said that it was inappropriate material for a children's book. Maybe that's referring to the fact that the pig was meant to be slaughtered for food. But anyway, those are some of the reasons why people over the years have tried to ban Charlotte's Web. All right, so moving on. Today is Tuesday, so we are going to review plot. And I say review, we have not done it yet this year, but it should be something that is somewhat familiar to you. Okay, we are then going to listen to a story. It's actually a story I love. And you're going to practice doing a plot diagram in your book. And then that will be our day for today. Tomorrow, we are going to start a new book in your springboard, a new story in your springboard book, and then we'll be talking about plot more. And all of this talk about plot and many of the things that we've been talking about with the stories we've read in the last few weeks are all leading us to next week, where you will be writing a narrative. Okay, so that's exciting for those of you that love writing. You're going to finally get to do some real writing in our class. For those of you that don't love writing, maybe it's another opportunity to get you there. All right, so elements of storytelling or plot. So the first part of a plot is the exposition, okay? And that's where the events give reader the background information to understand the story. The introduction to the story, usually it's the introduction, the exposition are the same, usually reveals the setting, the major characters, and the conflict. Basically, it's the introduction to the story. You find out what the story is about. The next part of the elements of plot is rising action. These are the major events that develop the plot and lead to the climax. Okay, the climax is, and actually there's the conflict, sometimes with a plot diagram in between exposition and rising action, they have the conflict where the conflict's really introduced, but that can be part of the exposition as well. The climax is the event that is the turning point in the story where the conflict could be resolved in different ways. Usually, but not always, it's the most exciting part of the book or the main part of the book where we know what's going to happen with the main conflict, but it's not always the most exciting part, but it usually is. Then there is falling action, and that is where the events that begin to wrap up, things start getting buttoned up in the story. So things begin to conclude and lead to the ending. And then the resolution are the events that conclude the story and reveal the theme. So the resolution is often in fairy tales and things like that, and they lived happily ever after. Okay, but with the theme is usually like kind of the main idea or the lesson of the story. So there's two types of conflict that characters encounter. Okay, so there's external conflict, and that occurs when a character struggles with an outside force, such as another character or something in nature. So, I'm trying to think of a story that we all know besides the ones that we've read this week. In the superpower story, that was an external conflict and an internal conflict, but the kid is dealing with a bully. Okay, so that is an external conflict. In The Jacket, Gary Soto, the author, is dealing with an internal conflict. He's dealing with his feelings about the jacket. The jacket itself, you probably could make a case that it's an external conflict, but the jacket's not really actually doing anything besides sitting there being ugly. So really the conflict is with the character himself. Okay, so that's an example of external and internal conflict. All right, so here is an example of a plot diagram. So here you have the exposition. This is where the story is set up. So you should be able to take this plot diagram and fill it out on basically any story. Okay, so this is where we find out what the story is about. The conflict is here. This is the major problem of the story. And then each of these things are small events that happen in the rising action. Then you have the climax of the story. That's where you find out how the main conflict is going to be resolved. Then we have falling action right here. And usually the falling action is a lot shorter than the rising action. Things start to get buttoned up a little bit. And then you have the resolution, okay, which is the end and where the lesson is learned, the theme is revealed. So now we are going to listen to this story called Those Shoes. You might have heard it before. And you're going to think about this right here, this plot diagram, as you listen to the story, because we're going to fill out the different aspects of the plot diagram after we listen to the story. Okay, so I'm going to grab this for you, and I hope this works while I'm recording too. Oops, should be good.
Those shoes. I have dreams about those shoes. Black high tops, 2 white stripes. Grandma, I want them. There's no room for want around here, just need. Grandma says, and what you need are new boots for winter. Brandon T. comes to school in those shoes. He says he's the fastest runner now, not me. I was always the fastest before those shoes came along. Nate comes to school in those shoes. Antonio and I count how many times Nate goes to the bathroom. 7 times in one day, just so he can walk up and down the hall real slow. Next, Alan Jacoby and Terrence each get a pair. Then one day, in the middle of kickball, one of my shoes comes apart. Looks like you could use a new pair, Jeremy, Mr. Alfrey, the guidance counselor, says. He brings out a box of shoes and other stuff he has for kids who need things. He helps me find the only shoes that are my size. Velcro, like the ones my little cousin Marshall wears. They have an animal on them from a cartoon I don't think any kid has ever watched. When I come back to the classroom, Alan Jacoby takes one look at my Mr. Alfie shoes and laughs, and so do Terrence, Brandon T., and everyone else. The only kid not laughing is Antonio Parker. At home, Grandma says, "How kind of Mr. Alfrey." I nod and turn my back. I'm not going to cry about any dumb shoes. But when I'm writing my spelling words later, every word looks like the word shoes, and my grip is so tight on my pencil, I think it might bust. On Saturday, Grandma says, "Let's check out those shoes you're wanting so much. I got a little bit of money set aside. Might be enough. You never know." At the shoe store, Grandma turns those shoes over so she can check the price. When she sees it, she sits down heavy. Maybe they wrote it down wrong, I say. Grandma shakes her head. Then I remember the thrift shops. What if there's a rich kid who outgrew his or got 2 pairs for Christmas and had to give one of them away? We ride the bus to the first thrift shop. Black cowboy boots, pink slippers, sandals, high heels, every kind of shoes except the ones I want. We ride the bus to the second thrift shop. Not a pair of those shoes in sight. Around the corner is the third thrift shop. I see something in the window. Black shoes with 2 white stripes, high tops, perfect shape. $2.50. Those shoes. My heart is pounding hard as I take off my shoes and hitch up my baggy socks. How exciting, Grandma says. What size are they? I shove my foot into the first shoe, curling my toes to get my heel in. I don't know, but I think they fit. Grandma kneels on the floor and feels for my toes at the end of my shoe. Oh, Jeremy, she says, I can't spend good money on shoes that don't fit. I pull the other shoe on and try to walk around. They're okay, I say, holding my breath and praying that my toes will fall off right then and there. But my toes don't fall off. I buy them anyway with my own money, and I squeeze them on and limp to the bus stop. At home, a few days later, Grandma puts a new pair of snow boots in my closet and doesn't say a word about my 2 big feet shuffling around in my 2 small shoes. Sometimes shoes stretch, I say. Grandma gives me a hug. I check every day, but those shoes don't stretch. I have to wear my Mr. Alfreys to school instead. One day during math, I glance at Antonio's shoes. One of them is taped up, and his feet look smaller than mine. After school, I head to the park to think. Antonio is there, the only kid who didn't laugh at my Mr. Alfie shoes. We shoot baskets. A loose piece of tape on Antonio's shoe smacks the concrete every time he jumps. I think, I'm not going to do it. We leap off the swings. I'm not going to do it. We race from one end of the playground to the other. I'm not going to do it, I say. Do what? Antonio says, breathing hard. Grandma calls me for supper and invites Antonio over too. After supper, he spies my shoes. How come you don't wear them? Antonio asks. I shrug. My hands are sweaty. I can feel him wishing those shoes were his. That night, I am awake for a long time thinking about Antonio. When morning comes, I try on my shoes one last time. Before I can change my mind, the shoes are in my coat. Snow is beginning to fall as I run across the street to Antonio's apartment. I put the shoes in front of his door, push the doorbell, and run. At school, Antonio is smiling big in his brand new shoes. I feel happy when I look at his face and mad when I look at my Mr. Alfrey shoes. But later, when it's time for recess, something happens. Everywhere, there is snow. Leave your shoes in the hall and change into your boots, the teacher announces. Leave your shoes in the hall. It's then I remember what I have in my backpack. New boots. New black boots that no kid has ever worn before. Standing in line to go to recess, Antonio leans forward and says, "Thanks." I smile and give him a nudge. Let's race.
All right. So that was those shoes. If you want to watch it again or listen to it again to do your work, you can do that. Just go to the slide deck, okay, in the weekly planner. And then on page 56 in your Springboard books, you are going to be filling out the plot diagram for those shoes. So you'll fill out the exposition, the rising action, the conflict, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Okay, there's a plot diagram for you right in the book. All right, so that is it for language arts today, besides Boy the Painted Cave later. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we're doing in social studies today. So I think I told you yesterday, we are going to talk about how civilizations emerge. And we're going to then, you guys on Thursday and Friday are going to be making your own slideshow about how civilizations emerge and the common things that civilizations have. And I'm writing myself a quick note. Okay. So you don't need to worry about that quite yet. I'm going to talk about that a lot on Thursday. That's when you're going to start it. So today we're just going to do a little more background information about the civilizations emerging. Okay? So civilizations emerged. And this also, but in pages 28 and 29 in your book, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to those. That's in your social studies textbook. If I was you, I would read through, highlight the information that you feel is important, but really understand those 2 pages so that when you go to make your slideshow, you know what you're talking about. Okay? So first thing. Okay, by the beginning of the Bronze Age, communities were widespread. And remember, the communities came about because of the agricultural revolution, made it to where people could stay in one place and they didn't have to be nomads moving around all the time. More complex cultures called civilizations began to develop. Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, all 3000 BC, all share similar characteristics. So those are 4 of the early civilizations that we're going to be talking about this school year. So that's exciting stuff. Okay, so in your inquiry journals, and I have that right here, on page 13, hold on, sorry. You're going to be filling this out, this chart, okay? So as we go over things this week, this is where you're going to be taking notes, and you're going to use that from your textbook as well. Okay, so those are the notes because you're going to be making your own slideshow telling the class about each of the characteristics that early civilizations shared. Make sure to pay close attention to these slides and your book and take notes. So in your extra time today, your probably time this afternoon, you are going to be reading your book and taking notes on page 13 of your inquiry journal. All right. So cities and government, and then you can take notes here in your inquiry journal while I go over these slides today and tomorrow, as well as if you want to just write it on note paper too. Okay. And remember, you can at any time push pause on me so that you can take your time with your notes. All right, so cities. The first villages began near water for many reasons. Irrigation, and that's so they could water their crops and their plants. Fishing, trade or goods, and ideas. Governments, the most common were there's a monarchy, which means there's a king or a queen. They created armies to protect them from other governments and other cities. They made laws, and government officials managed food supply and building projects. Okay, a lot of that is similar to how we live now. A discussion question: why did early civilizations form government? So that was something for you to think about. Okay, so actually that's it for today. We will go over the rest of the slides tomorrow. So since that was so short, you might want to read page 28 at least in your book today, so you don't have too much to do tomorrow. All right, moving on to our last part of today, Boy in the Painted Cave. We're getting close to the end. We are on chapter 16. So remember that Graybeard has sent Tao into like the secret cavern to do some painting of some animals, but he got lost in the way. And then his candle got a drop of water on it and was extinguished. So it's completely dark in there. If you've ever been in a cave before, you know how just like complete and utterly dark they can be way in the back. Okay, so we don't know what's going to happen to Tao now. Excuse me. Got my before reading yawn. Okay. Chapter 16. Tao limped on through the darkness, guided only by the unseen wall. The air was cool, yet he felt a dampness under his deerskin robe, and beads of sweat stood out on his forehead. He was trapped in this pitch-black underground passage. His hand brushed against the cold wall as he felt his way along, groping through the darkness with his left hand, holding tight to his crutch with the other. The gloom closed around him, surrounding him, and he was sure he was going the wrong direction. He shuffled along slowly, listening to the scraping of his feet, his eyes trying to penetrate the blackness. Then he smelled the reeking odor of burning fat. It was faint, but he took a deep breath and it became stronger. He limped faster, his hand out in front of him, reaching. Smoke meant fire, and fire meant light. He kept going, his heart filled with new hope. Suddenly, far in the distance, he thought he saw a faint glimmer of light. It danced for a moment, then went out. It came again, a pinpoint of brightness, far in the hazy darkness. It seemed to glow, then fade again. He limped toward it eagerly, stumbling, falling, then picking himself up again. The soft yellow gleam became bright. The white haze and the burning smell became stronger. Tao was breathing fast, his heart beating wildly. Soon he was able to clearly see. He hurried on, almost running now. A few moments later, he stumbled into a magnificent, brightly lit chamber. Glowing tallow lamps were set up in niches around the walls. Scattered across the floor of the cavern were hollowed-out stones and shells filled with paints and oils. Empty mammoth bones, standing upright, held brushes and sticks of charcoal. He blinked, and for a moment he looked around in silent awe, unable to believe his eyes. He had found the secret cavern. Tao dropped his crutch and fell back against the wall, his mind filled with wonder. Many times he had heard about the secret cavern, but never did he imagine it held such splendor, such color and beauty. Long rows of great hairy mammoths marched across the cavern wall, together with running horses, bristling boars, and giant cave bears, all in varied shades of red, tawny browns, and yellows. Images of woolly rhinos covered the opposite wall, while scattered groups of antelope and deer capered across the high arched ceilings. The almost life-size animals seemed to march through the cavern as if they were alive, moving and turning in the light of the flickering lamps. Tao was amazed by the dazzling colors. The animals were just as he had seen them, as they wandered across the plains or through the forest. The roe deer were tense, the mammoths ponderous, the bears and cave lions strong and fearsome. They were all here, brought to life in this secret place, the kind of drawings and images Tao had always dreamed of. He breathed deeply, filled with a sense of belonging. Now he would be a part of this secret place forever. He was glad that Graybeard had asked him to come. Tao walked over to a large, unmarked portion of the wall. He rubbed across it with the palm of his hand and felt its cool, clean smoothness. He reached into Graybeard's leather pouch, his fingers groping around for the graven stones. One by one, he took them out, until he found the slate with the engraving of the longhorn bull. He shook his head to loosen them, then picked up a large stick of charcoal. Now he would make his first mark on the wall of the secret cavern. With a wide sweep of his arm, he made a large outline. He held up the sketch for a moment, studying it. Then he began to draw. He copied the sketch, line for line, drawing the image of a longhorn. He drew the great square head with its long curving horns. He swung his arm freely, sketching in the massive shoulders, the thick chest, and the muscular body. Next, he reached into the deerskin pouch and took out a long flint chisel. Using a stone from the floor of the cave as a hammer, he began to carve out a shallow circle around the eye and nostril, just the way Graybeard had taught him. For a moment, he stepped back, nodding with satisfaction. Then quickly, he outlined 2, 3 more longhorns, one behind the other. With his bad foot, he pushed 3 of the paint pots closer to the wall where they would be within easy reach. He picked up a large feather brush and began filling in the colors, applying the yellows first, then shading in with reds and browns. Slowly, the longhorns came to life, their muscles rippling, their sides heaving in the wavering lamplight. On and on Tao painted, watching the herd of longhorns grow beneath his hand, watching it march across the long gray wall. He felt himself lifted up. He forgot about taboos. He forgot about the clan laws. He became so caught up with his painting that he even forgot about Graybeard and the clan hunters. He finished his longhorns now with wild strokes of his brush. He outlined a mammoth, drawing the high domed head, the curved tusks, and waving trunk. He worked swiftly with long sweeping strokes, letting his hand flow freely over the cavern wall. Again he brushed in the colors, first the yellows, then the reds and browns, and finally the deep shadows of black and gray. He was almost finished when he heard the shuffling sound of feet coming through the tunnel. He turned slowly, the dripping paintbrush still in his hand. Now the hunters, Volt and Garth, all of them, would see how well he could draw, and Graybeard would name him the new cave painter. He stood quietly at one side, a proud smile on his face. Tao watched as the clan hunters filed into the secret cavern. He saw them glance around, blinking in the flickering light. He waited for Graybeard to come in, but the old man was not with him. Suddenly, Tao's smile died. He saw the look of horror on Garth's face, and he knew he had done something wrong. He heard a vengeful curse and turned to see Volt standing behind him, stunned disbelief burning in the big leader's eyes. The hunters came toward him slowly, grumbling in their throats. A cold sweat beaded his forehead. He held up his hand. "No," he pleaded, "no. Graybeard will tell you. It is the will of the spirits." Volt stepped forward, pointing an accusing finger at the boy. His scarred face was contorted in livid rage. "You have defiled this secret place," he stormed. "You are a curse to this clan, you and that evil wolf dog." The violent words rang through the cavern and echoed in Tao's ears. "Graybeard sent me here," Tao said, "to paint the longhorns." He pointed at the drawings he had just finished. "Graybeard!" But the hunters would not even look at the painting. They crowded closer, glowering down at the boy. "You lie," said Garth, pushing forward and pulling the leather bag from Tao's shoulder. He held it up for all to see. "Look, he has stolen the shaman's pouch." "Perhaps he has killed Graybeard," said another, "and would now take his place." Tao was stunned. He shook his head. "No," he said. "Graybeard gave me the pouch. He will tell you himself." Volt's eyes narrowed. "Where is the shaman?" Tao swallowed hard. "He did not come with you?" "You know he is not with us," growled Garth. "What have you done with him?" "Nothing," said Tao, his eyes begging them to understand. "Graybeard will come. He gave his word." "Then where is he?" demanded Volt. "I left the shaman near the oak wood. He was sick." But I would not harm him. He was my friend. He taught me to paint in the caves. The hunter's eyes were filled with dark suspicion. They grabbed him roughly, pushing and pulling him through the twisting tunnel and out of the cave. They took him down to the edge of the camp, where they bound his hands and feet. In the dim light of the distant campfire, Tao saw the fury in their eyes. Find the shaman, he pleaded. That was Tao. Find the shaman, he pleaded. He will tell you I speak the truth. Still, the hunters would not listen. They gathered around him, bristling with anger, shaking their spears, their flint knives ready in their hands. Just then, Volt came into the light of the fire, his stocky legs planted wide apart, eyes flashing. Wait, he ordered. The boy has angered the spirits of the Longhorns. Now let him die by their wrath. Let him face Saxon, the sacred bull. Da-da-da-da. Okay. Come on, Graybeard. Tell him what's going on. Okay. So that is it for today. Last thing you will need to do is go into Otis and answer your chapter 16 questions. I hope you guys have an amazing day. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.